Howdy, howdy, y'all. It's another Maharaj video. This is chapter 21. Who am I? That's always a good question, right? Who am I? Um, this, I want to start with this video actually by a quote that's actually at the back of this chapter. So I've only seen this, I think, maybe one, two other chapters so far where they actually will include a quote in the back. And I really like the one they included here. This is Maharaj's quote. There is nothing to do. Just be. Do nothing. Be. I do not even say be yourself, since you do not know yourself. Just be. Having seen that you are neither body nor mind, just be. I think that is a good way of describing kind of the general idea of what he is trying to push in this chapter, especially with this questioner. This questioner, the only thing we really know about is that it's an older guy. Um, Probably around, it seems like he's at least around probably 60 or so, because I think he said he'd been pursuing this for at least 60 years, so maybe that's saying that he's 60, but could also mean, he's older and that he's been doing it for 60 years, so he could be like 80 or whatever. Um, older senior gentleman. I guess I'm assuming gentleman. Could be a lady. Um, Older person, definitely, especially because they even did at one point they're kind of doing the whole like kids these days sort of mentality. Although even it's at the same time, like, yeah, they do have a point. They do have a point. So like he was trying to at least be at least a little bit more measured. Um, but yeah, he went on a lot about virtue, and sin and virtue, and trying to say and trying to get Maharaj to really go on about these concepts. And you can see Maharaj really kind of then starts pushing back against this, and almost like it really kind of argues against it. Um, Although at one point, Maharaj does say that he says true virtue is divine nature. What you are really is your virtue, but the opposite of sin, which you call virtue, is only obedience born out of fear. And then the questioner said, then why all the effort at being good? And Maharaj says it keeps you on the move. You go on and on till you find God. Then God takes you into Himself. That makes you as He is. Um, and Maharaj, and then the questioner then says, so the same action is considered natural at one point, and a sin at another. What makes it sinful? Whatever you do against your better knowledge is sin. Uh, and then, yeah, and of course, question and response was knowledge depends on memory. Maharaj, remembering yourself is virtue, forgetting yourself is sin. It all boils down to the mental or psychological link between the spirit and matter. We call the link psyche. When the psyche is raw, undeveloped, and quite primitive, it is subject to gross illusions. As it grows in beneath and sensitivity, it becomes perfect link between pure matter and pure spirit, and gives meaning to matter and expression to spirit. There is the material world, and there is and the spiritual. Between lies the universal mind, which is also the universal heart. It is wise love that makes the two one. So yeah, and so he does kind of, like I say, kind of, but yeah, it's like it is interesting. Like these are, I think the big thing I got from this is like interesting. Like when you try to push like certain terminologies and stuff, like how it can, yeah, how it can, especially in this sort of conversation when like I don't know. I just what I find really interesting is like the virtue and like sin thing, which is something I personally had adhered to for a long time. It's something especially I grew up, as a Christian and whatnot for a while. So I am very, I'm very sympathetic towards this. But like this new way of thinking, or at least for me, newer way of thinking with Maharaj's, I am this sort of thinking. It really does kind of do away with this. I mean, you don't even really have. I don't know. You're like it's like you're just being. Like the quote says, you're just being. And so why are you? How can you even concern yourself with like sin and virtue? And it's not like saying you're like a bad evil person. No, you love, because I think he even says, at one point in here, like you're finding that, when you look where we're essentially, he didn't say this exactly, but essentially, like we're looking at within ourselves, we find that, the most inner absolute within ourselves, and that's in everyone else. And so then you can love that absolute, not within you, that's what within all of us. And so it is also like he even uses like talks about love being a bridge. You know, he even says it is wise love that makes the two one, that makes the universal mind and the universal heart one. Um, yeah, it this like I say this like this is a good chapter. This is a fun chapter. And this one too is just a picture of him in conversation, which is nice. Um, lots of different terms in here as well. Um, yeah, he calls. Yeah, he like another way he describes it, like the whole sin and virtue thing. It's like he describes it as a point of view. So, for example, he says again, the personal point of view. Why do you insist on polluting the impersonal with your ideas of sin and virtue? It just does not apply. The impersonal cannot be described in terms of good and bad. It is being, wisdom, love, all absolute. Where is the scope for sin there? And virtue is only the opposite of sin. And actually, that's just what he had said right before. Then he says, question. It says, we talk of divine virtue, and then that's when Maharaj responds, yeah, true virtue is divine nature. I read that before. Yeah. So, like I said, this is a good one. Actually, I think another part in here I will read. I might read here. It's actually the very first thing Maharaj says here. The questioner starts off with saying, "We are advised to worship reality personified as God, or as the perfect man. We are told not to attempt to worship the absolute, as it is much too difficult for a brain-centered consciousness." And this is how Maharaj responds to that. I think it's really, and I might, and I'll, probably, and I'll end the video on this. Truth is simple and open to all. Why do you complicate it? Truth is loving and lovable. It includes all, accepts all, purifies all. It is untruth that is difficult and a source of trouble. It always wants, expects, demands. Being false, it is empty, always in search of confirmation and reassurance. It is afraid of and avoids inquiry, and identifies itself with any support, however weak and momentary. Whatever it gets, it loses and asks for more. Therefore, put no faith in the conscious. Nothing you can see, feel, or think is so. Even sin and virtue, merit and demerit, are not what they appear. Usually, the bad and the good are a matter of convention and custom, and are shunned or welcomed, according to how the words are used. So, I think on that note, I'll end the video. I hope you all found this productive, and I hope you all have a good one. And until next time, peace.